So like some names just echo through the centuries, you know? And others, they kind of stick around like spells. And Solomon? He's both. You could try and find him in the Bible pages or like in the temple columns, or even in the old king family trees. But you'll never really get Solomon if you're only looking on the surface, man. 'Cause he doesn't live where history lives, you dig? He breathes in that space between history and myth, right at that point where faith kind of becomes code and language. It turns into a tool to bend reality. Solomon wasn't just some king, you know? He was like an operator of the invisible, a dude who held the unpronounceable name of God in his hands, who sealed stuff like entities with words, who built a temple for something that just can't be contained. We're not here to talk about the Sunday school Solomon, okay? We're talking about the one rabbis whisper about in the shadowy corners of those yeshivas, the one Sufis see as like a master of jinn. The Solomon who shows up in Arabic manuscripts as the guy who spoke with the winds and sealed demons in rings. The Solomon of those Hermetic grimoires and Hebrew alchemy stuff. The guy who used words, like a sword, and geometry like a spell. In this video, we're not going to be talking about history, but about what hides between the lines, you know? About the esoteric side of the king who built a temple, not just for worship, but for crossing between worlds. Get ready to walk through the invisible doors that separate Solomon's world from the one you know. They say God wrote the universe with letters of fire. But when Solomon raised that temple, he did something even wilder. He translated that fire into stone. The Temple of Solomon wasn't just some engineering thing. It was a code, an architectural mandala, a spiritual machine operating across like multiple dimensions. Most people, they just see some cultural thing in its building, a milestone of Hebrew religion. But the initiates, the real ones, they know that temple was a mirror of the cosmos, a ritual instrument, a structure designed not to house men, but to host the presence of the, ineffable. According to Kabbalistic tradition, the world was created through the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And this isn't just some metaphor for mystics, okay? Each letter, it holds a vibration, a number, a geometry, a power. They're the building blocks of existence, the atoms of creation. When Solomon started building that temple, he wasn't working with regular measurements. He traced letters in space. He wrote the sacred right into matter. The Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation. Some masters say Abraham wrote it himself. Others say it came from that philosophical vibe Solomon was around. But it describes how these letters are used to seal the four corners of the universe. And so, that temple becomes a seal, a space where geometry isn't just decoration, but invocation. The Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKodashim. It was a perfect cube, 20 cubits high, wide, and deep. Now, to a modern mind, that might seem like some irrelevant math detail, but the initiate, they recognize the language. The cube? It's the symbol of stabilized earth, the plane where spirit comes down and rests. It's the three-dimensional square, the manifest world in absolute balance. And of course, it's also the form of the cubic stone, the hermetic symbol of the adept who's conquered inner chaos. Gershom Scholem, the biggest modern scholar of Kabbalah, he wrote that the temple was the architectural version of the tree of life. Each space inside the temple, each ritual object, each veil and lampstand, they corresponded to a sephira, a divine emanation. This means anyone who walked into that temple wasn't just walking through some sacred space. They were ascending or descending the steps of creation. It was an alchemical rite from Malkuth to Kether, from earth to crown. Now this idea, it's not just a Jewish thing. In ancient Egypt, temples were also seen as petrified divine bodies. In India, mandalas are like habitable cosmic maps. In Chartres, those medieval stained glass windows, they hide geometric formulas the master builders never fully told anyone about. In all these traditions, architecture isn't art, it's magical operation. And, like every esoteric architect, Solomon didn't build alone, according to the Book of Kings. He was helped by this kinda obscure but really symbolic dude, Hiram Abiff, the master craftsman from Tyre. He was, the Kabbalists say, an initiate in the year, mysteries of metal and fire, his job, to forge the sacred utensils. But on a deeper level, he represents the fusion of pagan knowledge and Hebrew revelation, the union of wisdoms that the modern world has like artificially separated. But the question that's been haunting scholars since the 12th century? It's this: who gave Solomon the plans for that temple? The biblical answer seems clear. They were revealed by God. But those apocryphal and Gnostic texts, they challenge that view. According to the Testament of Solomon, a manuscript from like the 2nd or 3rd century AD, Solomon learned the temple's secrets from entities of the underworld, not from angels but from demons. One of them, Asmodeus, same demon who shows up in Persian stories. And in this text, Solomon captures him using a magical ring given by an angel. This ring? It allows him to control invisible forces. And with its help, spirits are forced to raise that structure. Every stone placed in that temple, it was moved by hands no human eye could see. Now this story, it kind of freaks out the religious folks, but it enchants the initiates, 'cause it reveals the secret of alchemy, light. It's born from mastering the shadow. A temple isn't built with innocence, it's built with integration. Solomon didn't reject the dark side, he sealed it, he subjected it to the order of the word, he turned chaos into structure. This model of the temple as a mirror of the soul, it really influenced Freemasonry. In Masonic rituals, the Temple of Solomon is symbolically rebuilt at every initiation. Freemasons, they don't build with stone and mortar, they build with symbols. With each degree, new chambers of the temple are revealed, not as physical places, but as states of consciousness. That's why the Temple of Solomon never really stopped existing. It was destroyed historically, sure, but esoterically, it continues to be built stone by stone within every seeker. That temple, it's a labyrinth. There's no direct entrance, no visible staircase. Every step, it demands silence. Every symbol, it's a key. Every door, a trial. And at the center of that labyrinth, emptiness. 'Cause the Holy of Holies, it was empty. No image, no throne, no altar. Only the space where the Shekinah, that divine presence, hovered. It was a place meant to be inhabited by that which cannot be named, and that's the biggest mystery of that temple. It was built for silence, for the invisible. The surface, Solomon's story is about a king, but deep down, it's the story of a magician. And like every archetypal magician, he had an object of power, a ring. Now this ring, it wasn't just some fancy jewelry. It was the seal, the boundary between the visible and the invisible, engraved according to Jewish tradition with the Shem HaMephorash, the 72-letter name of God. This ring, it allowed Solomon to command forces that ordinary dudes wouldn't even dare to name. But before we talk about the ring, we gotta understand the power of the name. In the ancient world, a name wasn't just a label. It was the actual vibrational essence of a thing. To know the name of something, that was to know its metaphysical structure. It was to master it. Like in those ancient Egyptian rites where knowing the secret name of Ra gave you power over the sun itself. Or in Hindu rituals, where the mantra is the sound of the deity itself. In Hebrew tradition, the name of God, it's unspoken, 'cause to speak it is to invoke it. And Solomon, according to the Kabbalah, he knew more than just the one name. He knew all 72 names that came from some mystical reading of 3 verses from Exodus chapter 14, verses 19 through 21. These names, they're formed by combining 3 lines of 72 letters in this alchemical permutation process. The result? A vibrational ladder, a cosmic keyboard. Each name, a code. Each code, a key. The Shem HaMephorash, it's not just some word, it's a coded energy field. And the one who has it, like the rabbis of the Zohar say, they touch the roots of creation. This name, according to tradition, it was engraved on Solomon's ring, and with it, the king sealed deals with the invisible. In the Testament of Solomon, that apocryphal text from like the 2nd to 4th century CE, Solomon gets that ring from an angel named Michael, and with it, the king invokes, interrogates, and subjugates demons and spirits. The first one he catches? Ornias, a spirit who sucks the life force out of young men and women. Now Solomon, he doesn't just destroy him, he questions him. He wants to know where he came from, how he acts, what star he operates under. This is crucial, man. Solomon doesn't just exercise, he interviews. 'Cause the seeker of wisdom, they don't just get rid of chaos, they understand it. Over time, Solomon captures 72 spirits, each with their own function, appearance, and domain. They're described in detail. Some have multiple heads. Others ride dragons. Some teach sciences. Others cause delusions. But they're all parts of the same puzzle. Echoes of the powers of the world. Raw forces of nature and psyche. These 72 spirits, those are the ones who show up in the Ars. Goetia. That's the first part of that famous grimoire, the Lemegeton, or the Lesser Key of Solomon. They're called the governors of hell. But that word, hell, you gotta understand it in the Greek sense of Hades, the inner world, the deep unconscious, the underworld of reality. Medieval European grimoires, they turned these spirits into demons, but ancient Solomonic texts, they treated them like forces of nature and astral intelligences. Later esoteric traditions, they go even further. They claim each of these 72 spirits is like an inverted face of one of those 72 sacred names. In other words, each demon is the shadow reflection of a divine energy, the union of opposites. Once again, that alchemy between name and number. Like Eliphas Levi wrote in Dogma and Ritual of High Magic, the Ring of Solomon, it's the circle of the will, armed with the sword of the word. The dude who's got it justly fears neither hell nor heaven. But watch out, man. That ring, it's a symbol. It's not physical. It's the image of the inner power of an initiate who knows the names, masters the word, and isn't afraid to look into their own shadow. And maybe that's the biggest lesson of the Testament of Solomon. The spirits he masters, they're not just external. They're projections of human passions, fears, desires, and obsessions. Each imprisoned spirit, it's a part of the psyche illuminated by consciousness. Solomon, then, he's the perfect alchemist. He doesn't just kick out the demons. He orders them. He interrogates them and transforms them into laborers of the inner temple. This vision, it's shared by Hermetic, Sufi, Gnostic, and even some Tantric, Hindu traditions. To master the world, it's not about subjugating others. It's about putting your own impulses in service of something greater. In Islamic tradition, the Quran also talks about Solomon, or Suleiman, as a prophet who commanded the winds, the birds, and the jinn. In Surah An-Naml, the spirits work for him. They build palaces, they fetch thrones in seconds, but in the end, when Solomon dies, his staff holds his body upright, and only when worms eat it away do the jinn realize he's been dead for a long time. That image? It's powerful. It shows that even the subtlest forces bow to the appearance of power. But true power, it lies in silent knowledge, not in the gesture, but in the seal. Solomon's ring, then. It's the metaphor of will aligned with wisdom. It's the dominion of language over chaos. And those 72 spirits, far from being infernal horrors, they're teachers of the abyss, unwilling guides whose voices can only be understood by those who dare to enter the silence. The name, the ring, and the spirits, they form a magical triad. Name the vibration, ring the focus, spirit the force. Whoever's got one without the others, they fail. Whoever unites them, they build worlds. And for that reason, in the oldest traditions of spiritual alchemy, Solomon isn't just remembered as a king, he's honored as Magus Regius, the Mage King, the alchemist of language, the Lord of names. True wisdom, it's never comfortable. It's like a blade that cuts through illusion with such precision that for a moment, the world seems naked, shapeless, almost unbearable. Solomon, known in Hebrew tradition as Shlomo, which comes from shalom, meaning peace, he bears that name not because he lived in peace, but because he understood that abyss that lies between comprehension and madness, and he chose to dwell in that abyss. When Solomon asks God for wisdom in the Book of Kings, he's not asking for cleverness to govern. He's asking for access to the Logos, the creative word, the primordial language through which all things were formed. The word used there? Chokmah, same one you find in the Zohar as the second Sephirah, right beneath Keter, the crown. Chokmah isn't just intellectual knowledge. It's the spark of creation within the divine mind. This wisdom, then, it's pure fire. And fire, when you touch it before its time, it burns. In those apocryphal texts, like the Wisdom of Solomon, traditionally they say the king wrote it, but Hellenized Jews in the 1st century BCE, they put it together, and we find this mystical picture of wisdom as a living thing, feminine, seductive, luminous, and terrifying. Solomon says that wisdom sits beside the throne of God, and that he loved her more than scepters and crowns. The image is clear. Wisdom isn't just some attribute, it's a presence. And this presence, it demands total surrender. That metaphor of a king in love with wisdom, it echoes those Sufi songs and Orphic hymns. It's the union of the mystic and the Logos. Wisdom isn't conquered, it's wed. And like every divine lover, it demands radical fidelity. But fidelity to wisdom, that's giving up comfort, and this is where the drama starts. Solomon knew too much. He understood the rhythms of the stars, the flows of the psyche, the names of angels, and the impulses of demons. He understood the language of birds, which the Sufis say is a symbol of the soul freed from the body. He knew how to interpret dreams and silences. He knew the secret of that unpronounceable name. And this wisdom? It was just too much for one man.